ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धस्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्तिर्नस्ताक्षुररिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरि ओम. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. While praying with steady limbs, may we attain the lifespan allotted to us. May Indra bestow well-being on us. May Pushan, the god of the earth, who is all-knowing, bestow well-being on us. May Garuda, the destroyer of evil, bestow well-being on us. May Brihaspati also bestow well-being on us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So in the last class, we concluded the study of the first chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanisad. Today, before proceeding to the last chapter, the second chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanisad, with which the Mundaka Upanishad will be concluded. Before starting that, we will have a short synopsis, an overview of this entire chapter, the first chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanishad. And as an introduction, we will try, after having the synopsis, if time permits, we will try to just have a discussion on the first mantra, very first mantra of the second chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanishad. So the first chapter of Mundaka Upanishad begins with the idea that the individual soul is separated from the Brahman, from absolute reality, from Brahman, because of ignorance. The individual soul, in essence, is one with Brahman because of ignorance, because of ajnana. He thinks himself to be separate from Brahman. And that entails all the suffering. The suffering is the result of this erroneous idea that it is entirely helpless and dependent on matter. That I am an individual, I am apart from the universe. As Brahman, I am one with the universe. As an individual, I am apart from the universe. And as I am apart from the universe, I have a lot of insufficiencies. And to get rid of all my limitations, I have to grab from the material world in the form of Putraishana, Vittaishana, Yashaishana. All these Aishanas speaks of trying to acquire something from this material world. And this dependence on this material world, because of our erroneous idea that I am a limited self, results in all the suffering. And then, what's the goal of life? Through the knowledge of my oneness with the Brahman, with absolute reality, all the phenomenal existence becomes something apparent to me. I become the witness of it. I get identified with that absolute reality. And I discover the innate goodness, the innate fulfillment, which is already in me. It was because of ignorance. I was dreaming all those nightmares, the long nightmare in the form of cycles of life and death was going on, but it was merely a dream. My innate purity, my innate greatness, my innate self-sufficiency was always there. Just the way when we go to sleep and we have nightmares, we wake up from our dream, and then we realize that as such, no change has happened to me. I am the same person who was before I went to sleep, it is the same person. All the things which I was seeing was mere nightmare. They have in no way affected the real me. So similarly, this Jagrat Avastha, this wakeful state itself is a long dream in the spiritual sense. And that we come out from the dream because when we get that knowledge of our oneness with Brahman, and then all this panorama has no meaning for me. It just falls off, just the way the nightmare, the dream falls off when we are awake. So that's the idea with which the Mundaka Upanishad starts. The first chapter of the third part of the Mundaka Upanishad starts. It's in the form of an allegory of two birds. What it says, Dva Suparna, the first mantra of the first chapter of third part of Mundaka Upanishad. Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakhaya Samanang Brikshang Parishashvajate Tayoh Anyah Pippalam Swadu Atti Anashnang Anyah Abhichakasheti. So there are two birds. They're always united, Sayuja, Sakhaya. Why they are united? In spiritual sense, one is just a mere reflection of the other. They are not a separate identity. One is just a projection, a reflection of the other. So they're always united. Just the way you can never be apart from your shadow. You and your shadow always have to be together. Similarly, these two birds, one the real, another its reflection, can never be separated. They're always united. Sayuja, Sakhaya. Samanang Briksha, the same tree. They're residing in the same tree. They closely cling to the same tree. The same tree of life, of this human personality. This, our persona, has these two aspects. The eternal witness is always there, sitting silently, witnessing the thing. The Jivatma, it gets identified with the happenings of life, and it thinks that it is suffering. But the witness is always there. And this Jivatma is nothing but the reflection of the witness self. So Samanang Brikshang Parishashvajate, both are residing in the same tree, closely cling to each other. Of this, Tayo Anya Pippala Swadu Atti. So this sweet fruit. So one of them is constantly tasting the fruits of the tree of life. Anashnan Anya Abhichakashiti. Anashnan means without eating. The other bird, which is the witness, he is not eating the fruits of the tree. He is just simply abhichakashiti. He is just witnessing, just looking. And then what it says in the second mantra? Samane brikshe purusho nimagno anishaya shochati muhyamanaha jushtang yada pashyati anyamisham asya mahimanam iti vitashokaha. So samane brikshe purusho nimagno. Purusho here means the individual soul, the soul which in association with the body-mind complex thinks itself as a limited being. So that's the Purusha. He remains drowned, nimagno. As it were, he's drowned. Nimagno means to be drowned. He's drowned in this phenomenal existence, in this tree. And so it moves. That's why it is shochati. This idea of drowning is very nicely explained, even in other traditions. The legend of the story of the Narcissus, we mentioned so many times, that from the Greek legendary character Narcissus, the word narcissistic has come. The one who is extremely self-possessed, we call them narcissistic. That how that word came, that Narcissus was a person, was a prince, extremely handsome. He was the prince, he was the crown prince, he was extremely handsome, but he was not interested in any of his responsibilities. He was so possessed by his own beauty that he forsook all his responsibilities. Whenever he had time, he will go into the deep forest in his kingdom where there was a huge reservoir. He will just stand by the side of that reservoir. He will stand on the shore, on the bank of that reservoir. And that reservoir's water was transparently clean. And it was always calm. The waters had no ripples. So he took it as a mirror, and he used to always see his own reflection. Being infatuated by his own beauty, he will spend hours looking at his own reflection. That speaks of the self-possessed person, not bothered about anything in the world. And one day it so happened, it took its own reflection to be real. It fell in love with its own reflection, took it to be something apart from him, as if, and he jumped to embrace it. It tried to embrace it, and he fell on the water, drowned, and died. So that's the story of Narcissus. So in spiritual sense, we are all Narcissus. We forgot our real nature, that I am Brahman. The word Brahman came from Bri Dhatu, which means Brihat, which is beyond all limitations in time, space, causation, and nothing can limit it. It got reflected in the reservoir called this body-mind complex. And seeing its own reflection, it is infatuated. And it has dived into it, nimagno, it has dived, and got drowned there. And it's when it gets thinks itself as limited, what happens? It forgets its real nature, that he is the Lord. Isha, the word Isha means the one who is the Lord is the Isha. From Ish Dhatu, to rule. The word Isha came, Ishvara, means the one who is the ruler. From Ish Dhatu, to rule. So he, the one who is actually the Lord of the entire existence, he alone exists. No one is there to subdue him. Only the question of subordination, subjugation comes. When there are two, then only the question of exploitation comes. One can exploit other. When there are two, when I am alone, who can exploit me? Of whom I am afraid of? I alone and the entire universe. So the ultimate reality, which alone exists by its own right, when it gets reflected in this psychophysical existence and thinks itself to be that limited being drowned in it, it becomes Anisha. It's not actually Anisha. It thinks itself as he has lost all its power. And that's why he cannot find that the world is full of challenges. And he has fallen into the trap of inescapable trauma. And he finds himself to be helpless. He has learned that he is helpless. Actually, he's not helpless. It is learned helplessness. From that inescapable trauma, it has conditioned him to that helpless situation of helplessness. And that's why he's muhyamana. He's constantly moaning. And then what happens? What he's doing, he's testing, as in the previous mantra was mentioned, he's testing the fruits. Swami Vivekananda, while describing this mantra, very nicely he says that the bird, the Jivatma, it is testing the fruits of the tree of life. Now and then he tests the sweet fruit, and it is joyous, happy, ecstatic. And then suddenly a bitter fruit, he's totally dejected. That's how he's constantly being carried away by the polarities of life in the form of happiness and dejection. And suddenly he tastes a very bitter fruit. And that speaks of that the tremendous dejection, that Vishada. You'll find all the scripture starts with that Vishada Yoga, not only Bhagavad Gita. The first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is Vishada Yoga. You study Bhagavatam, it's again that Vishada. It is Raja Parikshit who, going to the forest, was cursed. I won't go to the story that he is going to die within a week. It is from that Vishada, the spiritual inquiry dawned in him. If the world would have given us all, why should I be thought of transcending it? It is bound to end up in Vishada. The one who is going headlong in search of happiness in this world is bound to end up in Vishada. And then we try to look up. We try to find out the other dimension of our existence. As we say again and again, that in our life, as long as we are trying to find all the solutions of life in the sensate plane of existence, we can never find. As that example which we give again and again, that if you try to draw exactly 4 triangles by joining 4 points, you can never draw if you are putting the 4 points in a paper. Never you can exactly draw 4 triangles. Somewhere the 2 lines will intersect to create the 5th point. What's the way out? You have to put 3 points in the paper and 1 in the space. Now we imagine you draw lines, you get a triangular pyramid. So where the solution is? In another dimension. Unless you relate to that dimension, you can never find the answer. Similarly, in our life, that we become anisha. We lose our lordship because we're trying to find out all the solutions of all the problems of life in this sensate plane of existence. It can never give us. We will find we have ended up in the blind alley with all our progress. Or in the words of Swamiji, with all our progress, we find we are at the end of a precipice. One more step, you just fall in the deep gorge. The world can never give you answer. Then what's the way out? You have to relate to that another dimension. You have to look up to relate to your spiritual dimension of existence. That's been spoken of here. That Jushtang yada pashyati anyamisham, the other bird, which is just the witness. It's not testing the sweet and the bitter fruits of life, just witnessing, calmly sitting there with all its glory, asya mahimanam, with all its glory, with all its lordship, it is sitting there with full equanimity, in tranquility. The lower bird, out of Vishada, when he suffers intensely, looks up, relates to his spiritual dimension, realizes his identity, realizes his association with it, and then he becomes Vita Shoka. All the causes of misery, dejection, they start falling off. It's not that all the phenomenal existence proves to be favorable to him. The world remains as it is. He has transcended that. They become something, a matter of virtual reality. They are just a flow. It in no way affects the essence of his being, the real person, the real me. It's never affected by that. And that's how he becomes free from grief. And that's the thing which Swami Vivekananda, again, I will just read out that wonderful way Swami Vivekananda is commenting on these 2 mantras. It's a free commentary. He never quoted these mantras, but these 2 mantras were in his mind when he was giving lecture in America. So I will read out that portion. What a nice way he's interpreting. 2 birds of beautiful plumage, inseparable companions, sat upon the same tree, one on the top and one below. The beautiful bird below was eating the fruits of the tree, sweet and bitter. One moment a sweet one and another a bitter. The moment he ate a bitter fruit, he was sorry. But after a while, he ate another, and when it too was bitter, he looked up and saw the other bird, who ate neither the sweet nor the bitter, but was calm and majestic, immersed in his own glory. And then the poor lower bird forgot and went on eating the sweet and bitter fruits again, until at last he ate one that was extremely bitter. And then he stopped again and once more looked up at the glorious bird above. Then he came nearer and nearer to the other bird. And when he had come near enough, this is The explanation which Swami Vivekananda is giving is not even that vividly mentioned in the Upanishads. This is Swami Vivekananda's vivid visualization, which makes the mantra more powerful. What he's saying, he came near enough, rays of light shone upon him and enveloped him. And he saw that he was transformed into the higher bird. He became calm, majestic, free, and found there had been but one bird all the time on the tree. The lower bird was but the reflection of one above. So we are in reality one with the Lord, but the reflection makes us seem many. As when the one sun reflects in a million dewdrops and seems a million tiny suns, the reflection must vanish if we are to identify ourselves with a real nature, which is divine. The universe itself can never be the limit of our satisfaction. What a wonderful way this Swamiji just brings out the real meaning of these two mantras. So this idea, which has been spoken of in these two mantras, will be reiterated, will be again said in the next mantra, just to stress the importance of this idea of transcending this limited self, so that we can transcend all the sufferings in life. So to highlight this idea, again in the third mantra, the same idea is being reiterated, again being spoken of. Yada pashyate rukma varnam kartaram isham purusham brahmayonim tada vidwan punya pape vidhuya niranjana paramam samyam upaiti. So when Yada, the seer, what he does, beholds the golden-hued creator. Why golden-hued? To speak of the self-luminosity of the ultimate self. Just the hue of the gold is as if its own, it is not borrowed from anything else. So similarly, it's an allegory. We shouldn't take it in a literal way, that the self-luminous self is like that golden complexioned one, which doesn't have to, which in no way hires its luminosity from something else. It is the ultimate subject. So that it can never be illumined by something else. So that's the one, the Rukma Varnam Kartaram. He is the Karta. He is the one who is the creator. He is the one who is the ultimate reality. So Yada Pashyate Rukma Varnam Kartaram. So when this lower bird, the Purusha, the individual self, Pashyate, looks at that self-luminous bird, the Karta, the ultimate doer, the ultimate cause of this entire existence. He is the Isham. He is the Brahma. And what is that? The Brahma Yonim. So he is the one who is the progenitor of Brahma. So these are the technical terms. Brahma Yoni means when that the way we think that the creation came first, the world of matter, this matter somehow conglomerated and accidentally consciousness evolved from matter. That's the very shallow way of understanding with our so-called apparent science. Even in science, there's a big question if we really try to find out that what's the reality. To say that consciousness is an epiphenomenon, is a product of the phenomenon called the universe. The science also has a big question mark. They can never say definitely that's the thing, truth. In quantum science, that's the thing which is still puzzling them. So here, Upanishad, beyond any confusion, saying boldly, it's just the opposite. It's what we think, that consciousness is a byproduct of the conglomeration of matter, is just the opposite. The material world, the matter of which we see, is not there as such. That is epiphenomenon. It is the consciousness which is finding expression as the world. And how it finds expression? There is a gradual process of evolution. The consciousness first find expression as the cosmic mind. And the entire universe is as if been drawn like a blueprint in the mind of the cosmic mind. In the cosmic mind, there's a blueprint of the entire creation is there, which is being projected. This blueprint is being projected as this Virata, as this universe, as this tangibly felt universe. So it is a consciousness through the cosmic mind finding expression as the universe. So that's why Brahma Yoni means that the ultimate reality which is beyond the cosmic mind. Brahma, which is the progenitor of Brahma, which is the Yoni of Brahma, means from where Brahma, the cosmic mind, has emanated. So he, that mind, the real me, is the one who is even transcends Brahma. The idea of Ishvara in all the religion is up to that Brahma, is the one who is the creator. In Vedanta, that's the wonderful, we find, that's why the Schopenhauer is to say that reading Upanishads, studying Upanishad is just like climbing the Everest. When you go there, it thrills you. You're on the top of the universe, but the air is so rarefied there. The air is so rarefied, the oxygen is so less that you start feeling suffocated. You cannot stay there. You have to come down. So Upanishad takes you to that height. You feel as if it is suffocating as per your individual existence is concerned. If you're too much identified with this individual existence, it makes you as if suffocate. You cannot stay in that state because it is saying it is Brahma Yonim. It is transcending the mind. It takes you beyond the mind. So that's here the reality. And the idea that you are this individual self is just a product of the ignorance. So Tada Vidwan, the one who has realized, it's not just intellectual knowledge, the one who has realized. All knowledge comes from realization. Without realization, there cannot be any knowledge. Conceptual knowledge is no knowledge at all. The concept has to be realized. As we say, the one who have not tested the mango, he can never know the taste of mango. How many books he may read about the taste of mango? Knowledge is realization. So here Vidwan speaks of that realization through his spiritual practices. When he transcends the mind, he goes beyond the mind. When the mind becomes totally calm, the mind cannot exist when you go beyond thoughts. So it is to go beyond the thoughts can take you to that reality. Mind is equated with thoughts. When there is no thoughts, there is no mind. In the very second sutra of Yoga Sutra speaks of that. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And you may think that vritti means the thought waves, but actually the word vritti is a very interesting word. Vritti means profession. It doesn't mean waves. In Sanskrit, the word vritti means profession. How nicely that sutra has been spoken of. What it speaks, chitta vritti, the profession of the chitta. What is the profession of the chitta? The thoughts. These thought waves. Without these thought waves, the chitta cannot stay. Why? What it means actually, like my vritti sustains me. If I am a doctor, my profession sustains me. If I'm an engineer, my profession sustains me. If I'm a businessman, my profession sustains me. Similarly, mind's profession is a thought. When you can go beyond these thoughts, when the mind is totally tranquil, the real nature of the reality reveals. That's the real function of the mind. That as our mind is polluted, so it's not revealing the real self. The mind in its innate purity, when it is pure, it is tranquil, it is having no thoughts, it is having no desires. It is by its nature, by its innate nature is to reflect the pure self. So that's the state which has been spoken of as the word Vidwan. Tada Vidwan, Punya Pape Vidhuya. He shakes off both good and evil, washes off. Vidhuya means to wash off. Punya Papa, not only Papa, Punya and Papa. You may say, what that means? I have to go beyond Punya. Yes. Punya as such has no ultimate spiritual value. It helps us to transcend the Papa, but at last it also has to be transcended. As Sri Ramakrishna very nicely used to give an example. Suppose you are passing through a forest and a thorn pierces you. What you do, you just pluck another thorn of the same thorny bush and use this second thorn to pluck out the thorn which has pierced you. And once you have plucked it out, you throw away both the thorns. So the first thorn which has pierced is the papa. The second thorn which you're using to remove the first thorn which has pierced you is the punya. And once this papa has been removed, you throw the punya also. That also is a thorn. It has no use. As Buddha used to say, that he is a fool who carries the raft in his shoulder after crossing the river. No one carries the raft on his shoulder. So this punya is the raft with which we get rid of the papa. At last, both has to be got rid of. You wash off both, and then you reach the state of niranjana. These words are so wonderful, sublime. Anjana means taint. That's the state which is taintless, niranjana. And that's the state of taintlessness, which is the paramam, the absolute state, where it is totally samya. It is equanimity, where all the desires, the polarities of life, the dualities of life, the disturbance in the form of turbulence of your mind, they all have vanished. You have reached the state of equanimity. You have reached the supreme reality just by seeing at your reality, just by relating to the spiritual dimension of your reality. Seeing is that in spiritual life, that knowing is becoming. The moment you know yourself, you become that. So that's the idea which has been spoken of here. Just when you know what you are, you become that. So the next mantra, what it says, the knower of Brahman is described in the next mantra. So after saying that who is the knower of Brahman? Prana hi esha sarva bhutair vibhati vijanan vidwan bhavate na ativadi atma krida atmarati kridavan esha brahmavidam varishtha. Pranohi, the same vital force. Here the word prana. In Sanskrit, the same word is used has different meaning as per the reference, as per the circumstance it is being used. Here the vital force is actually speaking of the ultimate source of all vitality. The Atman is the source of all thoughts, as well as the Brahman is the source of all thoughts, as well as the source of all actions. Just this thing that sitting here, the rover which is on the Mars moving around, how it is moving around, and what it is doing, it is sending us the data, the photo, the pictures, the data, that those are the information. And at the same time, it is moving around. How it is moving around? Its remote is here in the earth. From the earth, the remote is there, which is allowing it to move around as well as to send us information. So in the previous mantra, it was mentioned that his Brahma Yoni, he is something who is the progenitor of thoughts. Here it is saying he's not only the progenitor of thoughts, he's a progenitor of all vitality, of all Shakti, of all energy. So that's the prana, the source of all vitality. He is residing as the vital energy in each and every being. The one who has realized that prana esha sarva bhutair vibhati. Vijanan, there's one who has realized that. Vidwan bhavate na ativadi. This word is very important, ativada. So when this vijanan means what? Not conceptual knowledge. One who has realized, who has just through his equanimity of mind, when the mind becomes equanimous, what happens? The mind is like a prism. When the white light is in the vicinity of the prism, it breaks into the spectrum of 7 colors. Remove the prism, all the spectrum merges in the white light. They are not separate. It looks separate because of the prism. Remove the prism. So the mind, this active mind, which is breaking into thought, is like the prism. The equanimous mind is like the prism being removed. And then you find that the prana is the source. That ultimate vitality comes from that Brahman, which has all merged in him. So one who has gone to that equanimous state of mind, where the prism has fallen off, and he has realized Vijanan speaks of that realization. He becomes Vidwan Bhavate, na Ativadi. For us, we have read the scriptures and we say, oh, we are that ultimate absolute reality. It's not a realization. So our words transcends our realization. What I am speaking is transcending my realization. I have not realized. So that is called Ativada. I am speaking something which I have not realized. That Sri Ramakrishna in a very jokingly says that the child have learned the word God's promise. How he has learned? He saw when his parents were quarreling among themselves, just to prove one's point that I am not speaking the untruth, I am speaking the truth, they use the word God's promise. Hearing that, the children, when they fight among themselves, they also start using word God's promise. Neither the parent nor the child, what to speak of God's promise? They know nothing of God, but they just use the word, using the word without realizing what it means. So that is Ativada. If I give a lecture on the taste of mango by hearing someone else speaking about the taste of mango, but I have not tested it, it is all Ativada. So here this word, very, very interesting, this word Ativada is that one who has Vijanan, when we Sanskrit, when they use a word to clarify that it doesn't allow us to have any gap in understanding. When it says Vijanan, immediately we may think, oh, reading the Upanishad, I also know that. That knowing is not the real knowledge. The real knowledge is realization. So Vijanan means realization. Then only you can be Nativadi. Your speech will never transcend your realization. You're speaking from your realization. Then what happens? And nothing can break your conviction, whatever may be the situation of life. In all the situations of life, whatever may be the crisis, and nothing can take away your conviction. You maintain your equanimity. You maintain your contemplation, even in the world of action, because you have realized the truth. And that's been spoken of, that what are the traits of such a person? He becomes Atma Krida, Atma Rati, Kridavan. These three words are very, very significant. Sometimes we think they mean same. They doesn't mean same. The word Krida means when you are enjoying by in a game which entails that you should have some companion. There should be other playmates. So cricket, football, all these are Krida, because you cannot play football alone. You need so many players. So Krida means when there are others. Rati means when no one is there, you are enjoying yourself. Sitting, that you are suddenly there, you recollect your past life, some nice golden moments, and you are enjoying within yourself. That is Rati. So this is the difference between Krida and Rati. So the enjoyment which comes in association with others is Krida. Enjoyment which comes by self-absorption is Rati. So now these words are very important. Atma Krida. The one who is playing with the Atman. Means what? When he's dealing with the external world. In his day-to-day life, he doesn't see A, B, C, D as different person. He sees the self and self alone in each and every being. And he deals with the self alone, not with Mr. B, and Mr. C. He's dealing with the self and self alone. That speaks of Atma Krida. So when he's interacting with the world, he's absorbed in the self. He is still worshipping. His worship is 24/7. There is no watertight compartment between his spiritual life and secular life. That when I am meditating, then I am one with Brahman. And when I am not meditating, the world has totally disturbed me. It's not the truth for him. He has realized the self. He sees the world of virtuality and never gets in any way deluded by it. He sees the self even in his activities, dealing with the world. That speaks of Atma Krida. And when he's with himself, then also nothing can distract him. He is dwelling in the self alone, Atma Rati. So Atma Krida, when he's dealing with the world, when he's deep in his meditation, again, for us, the Atma is never there. When I am trying to meditate, the world comes into the picture, thousands of thoughts of the world. Though I am sitting for meditation with my closed eyes, my mind is wandering in the world alone. So it never becomes Atmarati. And when I am, of course, dealing with the world, the question of self never comes. So can never be Atma Krida. And then the third word is Kridavan. It speaks of the skill he has developed. That this Atma Krida, Atmarati for us is a practice. That when I am dealing with the world, I try to see the self in others. Again and again I fail. Again I try. When I'm meditating, I'm trying to be absorbed in the self. I get distracted. Again I try. But the one who has realized he's Kridavan, is extremely skillful in his game. Nothing can deviate him from his realization. Not a single moment. His realization has made his life spontaneous. The goodness has become spontaneous. As in the Yoga Sutra, they speak, when you go to the realization, you are filled with Ritambhara Pragya. Ritam means truth, Bhara means full of Pragya. Pragya means full of truth. So here, you have realized the truth. There is no question of deviating from the truth. Just as long as you have not experienced what mirage is, you are thirsty, you may be drawn by that mirage, thinking that reservoir is there. Once you have realized, you may again see that huge body of water, but it cannot drag you. So there is no question of being deviated. So the one who is Atma Krida, Atmarati is also Kridavan. He has become adept. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the one who is an adept dancer, the one who is an adept dancer, skillful dancer, his step never falls out of rhythm. He's an adept. His dance, the rhythm to fall, his steps falls in this rhythm spontaneously. So similarly, the Kridavan means of that spontaneity. So Atma Krida, Atmarati, Kridavan. When he's dealing with the world, he's seeing the Atman in each and every being. And for that, there is no question of practice. It has become spontaneous. Atmarati, when he is with himself, he is absorbed in the self. There is no question of practice. It has become spontaneous. When such is the situation you find in anyone, that's the spontaneity has ensued in his spiritual life. He sees the Brahman and Brahman alone in all the situations of life. Know him to be Brahma Vedam, Varishtha. He is the chief among the knowers of Brahman. Others are Paramparavid, following the Parampara tradition. They're trying to get established in that. They're also exalted beings, but they are not Brahmavid. They are Paramparavid, knowing the Parampara, the tradition. They are practicing. They're still practicing. But such a person on whom that spontaneity has ensured, he is the real Brahmavid. That's why in this mantra it has been spoken of that he is Brahmavidam Varishtha, the chief among the knowers of Brahman. So then what's the way to achieve that goal? Satyena Labhya, the fifth mantra. By practicing truth. Tapasa hi esha atma. By tapas. Tapas here doesn't speak all those meaningless austerity, like standing in one feet. To keep the mind always in the thought of Brahman is the tapas, real tapas. The mind is deviating. Again and again you bring back. The state of spontaneity in the Brahmavid. That when I'm practicing, that becomes tapasya. What is spontaneous in a realized soul? When I try to imitate, that becomes tapas for me. So this one who is constantly doing that tapas, one who is established in truth, satyena labhya, tapasahi esha atma, samyak jnanena. Samyak jnana, again, it speaks of the practice of what the Atma Krida's practice is samyak jnana. That if Brahman is the absolute reality from which the entire universe is projected, then in each and every dealing of my life, I have to be aware of that fact that I am dealing with Brahman and Brahman alone. That speaks of samyak jnana. For us, the jnana is not samyak. Why? It doesn't pervade the entirety of my life. That when I am closing my eyes, sitting in the shrine in front of the deity, I think I am in communion with the divine, not at other time. So that cannot be the samyak jnana. The samyak jnana speaks of that when I am meditating, yes, I'm communing with the divine. When I'm interacting with the world, still I'm communing with the divine. So that type of knowledge. When you're practicing, that speaks of the Samyak Jnana and Brahmacharya. So these are the practices. What Brahmacharya speaks of? Generally, we translate it as chastity, which speaks of subjugation, that I have to force myself that so that my senses are not drawn outward to the world of this sensate experience. But the word Brahmacharya itself will speak of its real meaning. Brahme charati yah sa brahmachari. The one who is incessantly thinking of Brahman, how can his mind get chance to speak of anything else? So it doesn't speak of subjugation, it speaks of sublimation. You don't force yourself to keep your mind control. You think of something sublime so that automatically the other thought falls off. Even in the modern psychology, that's the thing which they say, that if you find anyone is addicted, anyone is obsessed, try to develop some good habits, try to develop some good hobby, some good occupations, so that your mind gets engaged in that, the other thing naturally falls off. Here, they're speaking of keeping the mind engaged in that ultimate reality, Brahmacharati, constantly think of Brahman. So these are the practices. Be established in the truth, do tapas, constantly try to think of the truth. Samyak Jnana, that in whatever stage of life you may be, circumstance of life you may be, never be forgetful about the ultimate reality, which is within you, which is everywhere, and constantly you are contemplating of Brahman. So these are the different words, but actually speaking the same thing. From the various perspectives, it is speaking of the same thing. So the more and more you're constantly trying to delve in your real nature, then what happens? Then it no more remains just a conceptual knowledge. It becomes realization. What's the realization? Antasharire, within you. Jyotirmaya hi Shubhra, the resplendent, Shubhra, the one which is beyond all impurities, is pure. Yah Pashyanti. These words are so poignant. It is just speaks, just hits just the target. Pashyanti. No more belief. He sees. How he sees? Yataya Kshina Dosha. When through this repeated practice of keeping your mind in Brahman, which automatically speaks of getting rid of all the distractions of life, which speaks of complete knowledge, which speaks of tapas, with all this, all the turgidities gets dissolved. Your mind becomes pure, free from all turgidities. That speaks of the Kshina dosha. All the dosha has fallen off. And once the dosha is fallen off, the mind's by inherent nature is to reflect that Brahman. When the mirror is having distortions, you can never see the exact reflection. The reflection also gets distorted. If you can make the mirror clean, and if you can get rid of all the distortions in the mirror, the reflection will be perfect. You can see the person as it is. That's the thing is being spoken of here. That mind is like that mirror. Get rid of the turgidity and get rid of all the fluctuations. What makes the water impure? The turgidity, all the impurities, and the disturbance in the form of waves. So get rid of that waves of the thoughts and all the samskaras, which speaks of the turgidity. When you get rid of, then the clean mind gets in which the self gets reflected. So when someone used to say Ramakrishna, reading the scriptures, that Brahman is avang manasagocharam, avak manasagocharam. It is beyond speech, beyond mind. Ramakrishna immediately used to negate by saying, no, Shuddha man, Shuddha buddhir gochar. It is something which can be realized through the pure mind. And that's been spoken of here. Purify your mind. When the mind gets purified, in that pure mind, Shuddha man, Shuddha atma, ak. It is a mind, it is a atman, which is finding expression as the mind. When you get, and what is mind? It is just the turgi, it is just the waves, thought waves. Mind is equal to thought waves. Get rid of those thought waves, the mind is no more there. Where it has went, it has merged with the self. So this Shuddha man, Shuddha atma, ak, they're same. So when you When you can purify your mind, immediately you get one with the self because you become kshina dosha. The next mantra stresses among all these practices the satya. Satyameva jayate na anritam. Satyena pantha vitata devayanaha. Yena akramanti rishaya hi apta kama. Yatra tat satyasya paramam nidhanam. So in our scriptures, they speak of two types of mukti. One is atyantika mukti, another is krama mukti. Krama mukti means gradually liberated. You go after death to some higher plane of existence from where you are never gravitated back to this physical plane of existence. There you continue with your contemplation to be liberated ultimately. And here this mantra is speaking that suppose you have not heard of any of this truth spoken of in the Upanishads, but in your life you made it a point that I will never deviate from truth, satya. That itself can lead, it may not lead to atyantika mukti, but it will lead to the krama mukti. You follow the path of devayana. So what actually speaking of? That practicing truth, that Sri Ramakrishna used to say that in this Kali Yuga, satya is the biggest tapas. Je satte royeche she bhagavaner kore she royeche. The one, his Ramakrishna's words are so simple. The one who is established in truth is as if lying in the lap of God, is sleeping in the lap of God, is sitting in the lap of God. Why is saying so? Suppose I know nothing of the spiritual idea, but if I am always established in truth, it speaks of getting rid of your selfishness, that I never compromise with the truth. It is our fear that we always want to be secured with our limited individuality that makes us to compromise with the truth. Why our conscience gets crooked, just the way the river gets crooked. Why it gets crooked? When the river is flowing down from the mountains, when it comes to the plain, you will find it starts getting the curvatures. Why it gets curvature? When it is flowing down, the moment it finds a rocky terrain, the water immediately has a tendency to go towards the soft soil. And that's how it is getting the curvature. Our consciousness also gets all the crookedness because of our fear. As a small child, you ask, he never says that I don't want to be good. Everyone wants to be good. But what makes us compromise with the truth? Our fear. In this yuga, where we find in Kali Yuga, Shatya Kali Yuga Tapasya, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, in this present age, where you find that untruthfulness prevails, to practice truthfulness itself is a big tapas. And how it helps? You will find that how our ego can immediately drop off because of our love for something. The way you will find the mother's love for the child. When the child is in danger, the mother can immediately forsake her, even life, and she can forsake her life to save the child. What to speak of human being, even animals. In animals, you will find the fact is the same fact. The one who holds to an ideal, to the truth, just the way the mother holds on to the child. What happens? For the sake of truth, he can even forsake his life. He or she can go through all sorts of challenges, all sorts of persecutions. That speaks of what? Relinquishing the ego. Because the ego is the only cause of our bondage. When anyone is to ask Ramakrishna that when shall I be free, his answer is to be when I cease to be. So whether it is through practice of meditation or by holding on to the truth, if you can get rid of the I, it immediately speaks of the transcendence of your limited individuality. And that's been spoken of here, that forget about all other spiritual practices which has been spoken of in the previous mantra. If you just hold on to the truth and truth alone, if not, it gives you atyantika mukti through the path of devayana. You go to the higher plane of Brahmaloka, where you are always in the contemplation of your absolute reality, of your identification with the Brahman. As you are absorbed in that, all the bodily feelings are the cause of our reincarnation. It is our hunger, our thirst, our need to procreate. These are the things which is not possible without body. So these are the desires which begin gravitate us down to this physical existence. The one who has gone beyond the ego just by practicing satya, his mind naturally dives to the sublime experiences and remains contemplated there, because all these so-called limited things is no more there to gravitate him down. And so he can continue in his contemplation in that higher realms of existence to ultimately dive, to get merged in that absolute reality. So that's been spoken of in the sixth mantra, giving importance to the practice of satya, that just by practicing satya, we can get rid of our limited psychophysical existence. So after saying that, it speaks of that highest truth attainable. What is that highest truth? That after speaking that you attain that highest truth, what is that highest truth? Brihat, Chatat Divyam. It is beyond all locality. At present, if I close my eyes, if I close my ears, if I stop all the five senses, and if I stop all my thoughts, still I will continue with one thought. I am, unceasingly it is going on. And that amness is localized. It is somewhere. I know I'm sitting somewhere, though I am not perceiving anything. When you go to that realization, what's the indication? That amness is still there. It's not that it's like anesthesia, you have no sense. Amness is there, but that amness has lost its locality. To give an idea, that suppose on a weekend, after the lunch, generally when you are on the working days, the lunch is very light, and that you still continue with your work in your office. On the weekend, as you're relaxing, you have a heavy lunch, and then you have a nice siesta. That's not the normal hours when you sleep. You will find it happens, so happens, and when you wake up, you forget what's the time. Sometimes it happens that as per your habit in the morning, the moment you wake up, you just apply the paste on your toothbrush and go for brushing. So you will find sometimes it so happens that you are totally confused. After the siesta in the afternoon, you got up, you just went for brushing. Or sometimes it may so happen that when you are sleeping in your bed, you every day get up from the left side, and now you change the position of your bed. So such that your left side is on the wall, so you have to get up from the right. So as per your habit, you may go and clash, you will just collide with the wall, because that's your habit. So what it speaks of, your amness is there, but when you just woken up, you are as if transcending time, space, causation. You are not aware of the time, you are not aware of the space, there's the left, right. So just to give an idea, that amness without locality. So it's the thing which is uninterrupted. You get established when your mind becomes prasada, all the tranquility falls off. You even lose that locality. You transcend that locality. You go beyond that time, space, causation, getting established in that amness, which gives you the inkling of the essence of the reality of the entire universe. You get one with that. So that's the brihat, which is non-local. The same amness, which loses its locality, it becomes non-local. That's the brihat, that's the Brahman, and that's divyam. Why it's divyam? Because it is the ultimate subject. Everything else can be objectified. That cannot be objectified because it's the ultimate subject. It is achintya rupam. It is beyond chinta, beyond thoughts. Shukshmatscha sukshmataran. The mind says sukshma compared to the senses. The external world I see through the senses. So the senses are shukshma compared to the world. And again, the senses are more compared to the senses. The mind is sukshma. Because through the mind, the senses work. Beyond the mind, that is shukshmatara. Just in the full moon night, when I am seeing the earth to be illumined by the moon, I may think it is the moon which is illuminating the earth, but actually it is the sun which is illuminating the moon, which is not visible. In turn, the moon is illuminating the earth. Similarly, the mind appears to be divya, but it is not divya. It is being illumined by the real, by the self. It appears to be illumined by the self. In turn, the mind is illuminating the senses, and the senses in turn is illuminating the world. So that is the idea of Shukshma, is that it is the self is the one which is subtler than the subtlest, even subtle than the mind, it is beyond the mind. Durat sudure. And though it is one who within the core of my heart, the self resides to get reflected through the mind, to be projected as the world. And once it gets projected through the mind, the same self can traverse anywhere. The last galaxy which you see, with your mind, you can go even beyond that. The same self which is in the core of my being, which is sukshma, which is beyond the mind, through the mind, it can go to any extent. So durat sudure. Tat iha antikecha. The one who resides in me, through the mind, it percolates the entire universe. So it is far, it is near. Pashyatsu iha eva nihitam guhayam. So, by the tranquility of the mind, you have attained that who can be seen in the core of your being. You may again say that it is contradictory. You say that the self is everywhere. Then how can you just restrict him to the cave of your heart? To simply say that light is everywhere, but to see it, I need my eyes. The non-local light is perceived through the local eyes. The non-local sound is perceived through my ears. Similarly, in this human body, the way of perceiving the self, of seeing the self, is purifying the mind. When you purify the mind, the door of the heart as if opens. It is always closed. To reveal the self there, it is everywhere. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Bhakter Hriday Bhagavanir Baithakhana. Very interesting, very simple way of saying the truth. That the heart of a devotee is God's living room. What it means? That in your house, you have access to each and every place. You can go to the kitchen, you can go to your bedroom, you can come to your living room, you can go to the, the pergola, you can go to the lawn, anywhere. But when some guest comes, you will be sitting in your living room to spend some time with him, to interact with him. So similarly, God, Bhagavan, Sri Ramakrishna, how nicely is saying, it just reflects the Upanishadic truth. Bhakte Hriday Bhagavanir Baithakhana. Very nice that the heart of the devotee is God's living room. He is everywhere. But he meets the aspirant in the heart. That's the place. Just as we told, that light is everywhere. To see it, we need the eyes. Sound is everywhere. To hear it, we need the ears. Similarly, the Atman, which is all-pervading, is perceived in the cave of our heart when the mind is purified. So that's the thing which is being indicated in the 7th mantra. So see, here it's not only speaking of the ultimate realization, it is speaking of the practice. So the 8th mantra, what it says, na chakshusha grihate, na pivacha, na anyai devai tapasa karmanava jnana prasada. Jnana prasadena vishuddha sattva tatah tu pashyate nishkalam dhyayamana. You cannot see that ultimate self with the eyes, nor you can speak of it with your tongue. Na anyai devai. Devai here means other senses. The senses in Sanskrit is called deva. Deva means celestial beings. It also means the senses. Why? The word deva came from div dhatu, which means to illumine. So the celestial beings are illumined. They as if they illuminate light from their subtle body. So that's why they are called deva. The same thing the indriyas are doing for us. It is through our eyes the world is getting illuminated in the form of what I see. My ears are illuminating the sound. My skin is illuminating the touch. My tongue is illuminating the taste. My nose is illuminating the smell. So they are all illuminating. So that's why the indriyas are called deva. So neither any of these 5 senses can reveal that self. Neither it can be revealed by tapas or karma. How? Tapas and karma may integrate my life, but they cannot make me realize the self. What's the only criteria for realization of the self? Jnana prasada. Prasada means tranquility. Jnana means the buddhi. When your buddhi becomes tranquil, when vishuddha sattva is residing, is the only thing prevailing in your mind. The word vishuddha sattva, Very in a simple way to understand what is Vishuddha Sattva. Sattva means equanimity. Rajas means activity. Tamas means slothness, inertia, laziness. When you sit for meditation, constantly what we are struggling, that when my mind is little calm, it goes to that state of slothness. I enter a state of stupor. I go to a sleep. That is tamas. And sometimes I find that I cannot control my mind. It is just running. So it is rajas. So it is my constant struggle with this rajas and tamas to keep it mind in that equanimity. When through the practice, it has so happened that rajas and tamas has fallen off. There is no more restlessness. At the same time, the mind is not going to that state of stupor. It is alert but calm. It is alert but calm. So that is the state of Vishuddha Sattva. That speaks of Jnana Prasada. Your buddhi has become tranquil. That is the only criteria to see the self, which is Nishkala, without parts. As very interesting, these words are so important, and sometimes the great spiritual leaders interpret their meaning in a wonderful way. When someone in the West, it so happens Swami Vivekananda was delivering a lecture that you become one with Brahman when you realize the self. Someone from the audience was scared. She stood up and told, what happens to my individuality? Swamiji immediate reply was, you are not individuals yet. You become an individual when you realize that absolute truth. So we may find that what he's speaking of, is it something allegory? No, it's absolute truth. We sometimes use the word without knowing its meaning. The word individual, what it means? Individual, that which cannot be divided. Individual means to divide. Individual means that which cannot be divided. Everything as per my limited personality is concerned can be divided. I have so many different organs as per my physical body is concerned, limbs. As per my mind is concerned, so many thoughts. As per my vitality is concerned, so many different ways the vitality finds expressions, pancha prana. It's all having so many parts. The ultimate self is nishkala, beyond any parts. So you just see that, you get established that through that process of this meditation, dhyayamana. So meditation is the only way by which the mind becomes tranquil and the self is revealed. So esha anu atma chetasa veditavya yasmin prana panchadha sangvivesha pranai chittam sarvam otam prajanam yasmin vishuddhe vibhavati esha atma. So within this body, where the vital forces have entered into 5 forms, we're speaking of this conglomeration, this pancha prana, where this subtle self, esha anu atma, has to be realized within this body, in which the 5 pranas are finding expression. It has to be realized how? Through that intellect, chetasa, bheditabhya, by which is pervaded the entire mind. That it is the self which alone is making the mind look illumined. So it is the self which is pervading the entire mind. That self which is pervading the entire mind, that has to be realized. So when in the screen, the various moving pictures are projected, you cannot see the screen. You have to stop the projection of the pictures. Then the screen becomes palpably visible. The light can still pass through the projector, but as the reel is not moving, the light just illumines the screen. So that's the thing which has been spoken of here, that it is the self which is illuminating the screen, which is illuminating the mind. Why I don't realize it? Why the mind is breaking into various these perceptions? Because the mind is constantly active, breaking into thoughts. Stop that. The screen becomes visible, palpably visible. You easily understand that the projector is being illumined by the light. So that's the thing being indicated by the word sarvam otam prajana. That then you realize the self is illuminating the mind. And then how it is possible? That's the thing. That's yasmin vishuddhe vivati Vibhavati Esha Atma. So just remove the thoughts, stop the reels to move in front of the projector. Then you can palpably realize that it is the self which is illuminating your mind. And once that is realized, you have realized the self, you have gone beyond the so-called all the projections. And that's being spoken of in the 9th mantra. The 10th mantra is the eulogy, the last mantra. And this 10th mantra has something to do with the first mantra of the next chapter, So we will, today we have taken a lot of time. We will take this 10th mantra. We have almost had a synopsis of the first chapter of the third part of Mundaka Upanisad. In the next class, we will start the last chapter, the concluding chapter of Mundaka Upanisad. And to have a sense of continuation, we will take up the 10th mantra of this, the last mantra of this chapter, and then we will find out the continuation in the next mantra, the first mantra of the last chapter. So we will take up the 10th mantra to study as an introduction of the last chapter of the Mundaka Upanishad. The 10th mantra will be an introduction to that. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.